Welcome to the Mool Med podcast, part of the moolmed.com wellness clinic, and our ongoing desire to provide free information to help you feel your best.
Episode 1 of the Mool Med podcast, and we are very lucky to have Gavin with us here today. Gavin has over 30 years of experience in the wellness space and has worked with a wide range of clients and worked on weight management and nutrition and hormone optimization. Yeah, just introduce yourself, Gavin. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yes, as you said, I've got 30 years of experience in this space, working with a variety of different people, worked with professional bodybuilders, professional strong women, mothers of 3 in their mid 40s, guys that wanted to break into bodybuilding on different levels, whether it was open, classic, or physique. And just people in general just wanted to get healthier and stronger, just looking to kind of optimize their genetics.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think it's super cool because if you see the pipeline of how information is passed down in the health space, I feel like it always starts with the bodybuilders. Not to say that they're like a beacon of health by it, but longevity isn't necessarily their concern, but they're like these astronauts that'll go out there and try a bunch of things and are looking to optimize. And they're also very diligent with their blood work. So it's great to learn from their experiences, and then you can titrate that information. Often they'll go to athletes and then they'll go to the general population, right? So it's great that you worked with that whole spectrum of clients, and we'll tap into that well of information today. This episode we're going to talk about peptides, and we're gonna we'll talk about NAD plus as well, which is not a peptide, but we'll just go over an introductory breakdown of the most commonly used peptides, and you can share your information on what you've seen in patients and clients, and then we'll take things from there. So let's just start off simple. What is a peptide?
So peptide is just an amino acid chain. So, and then there's going to be different analogs that are added to it, which can then help it, have different actions in the body. And there's a variety of different peptides. You have your growth hormone releasing peptides. Some are biological, so then they actually can be classified as a hormone. So there's several different types. A really cool thing with peptides is you can design one specifically to do a particular thing in the body. So, you can have one that specifically targets abdominal fat, or one that specifically targets healing and injury, one that handles connective tissue, one that helps with the heart, one that helps with a muscular injury. So there's they do a lot of great things for the body.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some of the common misconceptions you see with peptides? Because I feel like they occupy this space of some of them do work more like medications, and some of them maybe work a little bit more like supplements, and it depends on the series and chain of amino acids and how many amino acids there are. But what are some of the things that maybe patients come to you with like misconceptions about them?
I would say the biggest misconception is, and this is, I think, with anything, even with supplements, it's not a miracle drug. Right. So it can do some really good things for you. But I think sometimes people think, oh, well, I heard this peptide helps with losing body fat. And in fact, actually, I had somebody 2 weeks ago say, so I can just go ahead and take this and I'm not going to have to work out as hard. And I was like, no. Because this is helping you. This is the time to really hit the accelerator. This is the time to really push, because you are going to have that extra oomph and that extra bit to help you. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception, is that they can do that. And then, of course, there's the small things, like when you let people know this has to be refrigerated, they can be a little surprised by that, or it's going to be a daily injection. So, or in some cases, it's an injection 5 days out of the week or 6 days out of the week. But the number one would just be, this is a miracle drug. And it's going to do everything for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important to educate patients on the fact that this is not a panacea. This is not going to solve all your problems. This is going to be one of the tools in your toolbox. And it's also like when you are spending $250, $300 a month, or maybe even more to get on a peptide, I think for a lot of people, it can motivate them to be like, okay, now I'm taking this compound. I should also optimize my nutrition and optimize my gym regimen. And it's very important to educate patients on that too, and on how to go about doing that. So that's great. And then, I think you've run into this frustration as well, where it's important to distinguish when we are talking about peptides, we are talking about 503A compounded pharmacy peptides. And
absolutely. Yeah.
Unfortunately, most of the peptides that people use are coming from gray market sellers or these lab use only compounds, right? That will say not for human consumption. Um, and people are buying these online. Obviously, it tends to be a little bit cheaper. You don't need a doctor's visit to get them, and the risk is obviously these are sterile compounds that you're injecting into your body. You are not really aware of the dosing, the contamination risk, the degradation of these compounds. Speak a little bit on that in terms of,
Yeah.
have you seen patients even come from gray market use and have inconsistent results and side effects?
Definitely have. And I think the thing that people really also have to worry about is not just about the compound, obviously the big one, the compound being sterile and safe. But let's just say, this company imports a peptide. Let's say they import Samorelin and Tesamorelin. All right. Tesamorelin is much more expensive. If what they imported actually winds up not being Tesamorelin, they're not going to take a loss on that, and they're still going to label it as Tesamorelin. And the reason is because they don't have to prove it.
Right.
They don't have to prove that because it says research only. So you might not even be buying what you actually think you're buying. Besides the sterility factor, you might be buying something completely different and not getting what you want, and then not getting the results you want. And then you'll think, oh, these peptides are terrible. But yeah, I've had people come in and, they've got gray market peptides, and, I've seen people with, inflammation, like a big red knot, and things like that. And that's something that could happen either way. But you have to wonder, like, did this happen specifically because of that? Did me personally, I just don't think it's a good idea to buy that type of peptide. I think you should be buying, something that's, like you said earlier, from 503A compounding pharmacy. I just don't think it's a great idea to do that. It's just too risky. Like I said, you might not be getting what you want. It might not be sterile, I mean, something that says for research only. I mean, do you really want to experiment on yourself? So,
yeah, absolutely. And none of this is obviously for medical advice, and this is for educational purposes only. But we would still recommend, if you're going down this path, have a practitioner holding your hand through it and walking you through it for all the reasons you mentioned. Great. So let's start talking about these peptides. I think one of the ones that people people have a really good response to is the growth hormone access peptides. They're further broken up into growth hormone releasing hormones and then growth hormone releasing peptides. The growth hormone releasing hormones are obviously sermorelin, tesamorelin. They work to stimulate the anterior pituitary to produce more growth hormone. And then the growth hormone releasing peptides, things like ipamorelin, CJC, I think hexarelin is also a GHRP. So those amplify the GH pulse via ghrelin receptors, which is like the hunger molecule. All of them don't necessarily promote hunger, but because they kind of work more upstream on the pathway. But speak a little bit on maybe the growth hormone releasing peptides. What do you see in clinical use in terms of the benefits?
So I always say sermorelin is kind of like a good way to just kind of dip your toe into the water. Just a good entry level peptide. It's a jack of all trades, a master of none. So it's going to do a little bit of everything for you. So I think the biggest thing most people report, and this is typically within the first few weeks, is much better sleep. The sleep quality is much better. And that's because of that growth hormone pulse. That pulse is about 30 minutes long, and it can really get you into that deep sleep. So people really enjoy that. And with improved sleep, of course, as you're sleeping, your body repairs itself. So that enables you to help build, more muscle. You feel more refreshed when you wake up. As you build more muscle, you're going to be able to work out more efficiently, burn more calories. So, that's a good one. Can also help with your skin, your hair, your nails. Like I said, kind of just kind of a good general peptide. So to help with everything. Tesamorelin is great. That one has been used for years to help reduce abdominal fat. You used to prescribe it to HIV patients because the HIV medications would cause them to get a lot of visceral fat accumulation. So that helped with that. I've seen great results with that. I've seen people go from 20% body fat to, let's say we had one guy go down to 17% in probably about 3 months. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you've been exercising for a while, you understand a 3% body fat change is good. I think it works best on patients who are typically in that kind of average to slightly above average body fat range. And that's because I think when somebody is already, if you're already 45% body fat, coming down to 42 is pretty easy.
Mhm.
When you start to get into that, 20, 15, 13 range, it begins to slow down some. So that can be a real game changer for somebody looking to get to that next level. Hexarelin, that's a great one too. That's actually been shown to have some cardiovascular benefits. So there's actually a cardiologist who's part of a peptide conference, and he prescribes that to everybody that's had heart surgery. He wants them to use that. He's
Wow.
seen a lot of positive effects on the heart. So that's a great one for that too. So yeah.
Interesting. Is
Yeah.
that just to reduce the visceral fat around the heart? Is that the thinking?
He thinks that hexarelin helps. It targets the heart itself and helps it heal.
Mm,
So
interesting.
yeah. I've also heard it helping with joints also, but
Mm,
in particular the cardiovascular benefits. So
interesting.
yeah.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that people have started doing is selling blends where you have one of the growth hormone releasing hormones and a growth hormone releasing peptide.
Yeah.
And this, I think, works really well in combination because you were targeting the growth hormone secreting mechanisms from two different pathways, and you could take lower doses of both and minimize side effects on both and
Right.
get maybe even better results.
Mhm.
Specifically, the tesamorelin ipamorelin combination, I think, is one in clinical studies
Yeah.
that patients love.
Yeah.
So yeah, speak a little bit on that and what you've seen.
Yeah. CJC with Impamorelin, that
Mhm.
people really seem to like that.
Yeah.
That's a good one because the CJC causes that growth hormone pulse, and then
Mhm.
the Impamorelin keeps it going for a little longer.
Mm.
So you get the initial pulse, and that kind of extends it. So it's like adding an extender to it. So by extending that pulse a little longer, I always tell people think of like Ceramorelin as like a V6 engine. And then the
Mhm.
CJC with IPA is kind of like your like a V12. It's going to have a
Mhm.
little more kick to it because it's a longer pulse. So
Yeah.
you're going to get better results then. So there's been recently a lot of talk, like you were saying, about blending them.
Mhm.
I've talked to some pharmacists from some of the compounding pharmacies we use. They're okay with blending certain combinations, but some combinations they didn't seem to think did it. They felt like it
Mm.
made it unstable.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
so I think you're going to see some blends, but they were leery of blending certain combinations. So yeah, but
Yeah,
the blends is a
there's
great way to just kind of get everything at once, minimize the
abs-
shots.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's I think a lot to still learn about the pharmacokinetics and
Mhm.
stability of some of these
Absolutely.
compounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you're describing is exactly what I see in clinical
Mhm.
settings as well. As sermorelin is a great way to kind of just enter the
Mhm.
space,
Yep.
and I would say maybe 50-60% of patients are pretty satisfied there. They're like, sermorelin's
Yes.
good. It's
Yeah.
like hitting all
Mhm.
my points. I'm sleeping way
Yeah.
better. I'm
Mhm.
noticing this body composition shift.
Mhm.
My workouts, if I have a really hard workout the next day, I feel like I can have another really hard workout and not
Mhm.
feel as depleted or sore.
Yep.
And then for the rest, when they're ready to make that jump to something more aggressive
Mhm.
to the V12 engine,
Right.
they're
Right.
really excited about the ipamorelin
Mhm.
sermorelin combination or
Yeah.
CJC, um, and ipamorelin combination as well.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So we've
that's
got. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh, that was it. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, one patient in particular, he loves Ceramorelin. I mean,
Mhm.
he's used it for, boy, I would say the better half of about a year and a half now. And
Mhm.
he's used some other things too, GLP-1s and HRT, but when he added the Ceramorelin, it really kind of pushed him to another level.
Mhm.
Uh, of course, it takes some time. Like we were talking about with the peptides, they take a little bit. So it took a good 2 to 3 months to really get rolling. But right away, he had the better sleep. But in terms of body
Yeah.
composition, it really began to help him there. And I think we just, like everybody, right? When you sleep better, you feel better. So you're kind of in a better
Yeah.
mood. So
Yeah.
I think things are instantly better. But yeah, I would say just about everybody is pleased with that. If they're not pleased with that particular peptide, it's usually because they just want a little more kick.
Mhm.
But I've never had somebody actually say, I don't like it. It's just more of I like it, but I'd like a little more kick. But it is a good entry level one. It's like, again, back to the car analogy, you're buying your first car, maybe you get your
Mhm.
kid like a Honda Civic or a Toyota Corolla for their first car just to kind of ease them into driving. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
it'll get
everybody
the
needs
job
that.
done. It'll get you from point A to point
Absolutely.
B.
Oh, absolutely. It
Yeah.
definitely, you will see some changes with it if you're consistently exercising, you're following a sound nutrition plan, and you're consistently taking it too. I think that's sometimes where people get lost is, it's an injection every day. And, even though it's a tiny insulin needle, and it's subcutaneously and it's only about a quarter of an inch, that can kind of wear on people. And I think sometimes that's where they get a little lost.
Yeah. And the impact on sleep is super important, and one of the underrated effects is the effect on mood. There was a sleep doctor who I was speaking to once who described sleep as your endogenous therapist, where you do a lot of emotional processing, right? And if you want to make someone suffer, just deprive them of sleep, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So deeper, more restful sleep, your body's healing and recovering, your mind is healing and recovering as well. So. That's great. And you also mentioned that this your client was also taking GLP-1s, and I think that's something that growth hormone secretagogues work really well in pairing with, because as we'll get later into this episode on GLP-1s, one of the downsides of the GLP-1s is the muscle wasting, right? So if you're losing 20 pounds, maybe 8-9 pounds of that is muscle, which isn't
exactly
good for
that's not good.
Right. So pairing a GLP-1 with a growth hormone secretagogue, along with getting adequate protein, weight training, and making sure your macros are in check.
You've got to keep that muscle tissue stimulated to keep it. So
wonderful. Okay, great. I think we've covered the growth hormone axis peptides. Now we can maybe go into something else that's super popular, and there's a lot of great anecdotal data on, which is BPC 157. It's often also called PDA, which is the pentadecapeptide arginine. There's just an arginine anion, right, to kind of stabilize the compound. And to get around regulations, but this is something that's often termed like the Wolverine molecule, right? With just helping with regeneration and recovery. There's so many anecdotes of just they had like maybe an ACL tear and they're undergoing recovery and they've started injecting BPC 157, and they're like, my physical therapist is shocked that I'm at this stage of recovery early. So go ahead, speak on that.
Yeah. So I've used it twice. So I had a pretty major shoulder surgery in 2020. So it was that summer, right? Kind of the height of COVID. I had a fantastic surgeon. He had worked with some professional baseball teams before. So I figured this is the guy to do my shoulder. So the MRI did not show the extent of the damage until he actually went in there. And it didn't show the 3 labrum tears I had, or so the labrum was it was wrecked. So he goes in, he fixes it. I start on at the time BPC 157. I start that. Surgery was, I believe it was August 22nd. I start that peptide around the 25th. I continued using it until January, and every month I went to see him. The results were unbelievable. And I'm going to say, of course, I had a great physical therapy team. And I'm one of those people that did my at-home exercises, and a lot of people don't. But there was a point where, they were really impressed with the results. And, to this day, if I ever see that doctor, he always grabs my arm and starts moving my shoulder around. So, but I had that surgery in my mid-40s, and I've made a 98% recovery, 99. You're never really going to be 100%. But there's only one thing that really bothers my shoulder, and that's if I kind of move my arm at a weird downward angle. But how often do you do that? And it's just a slight pinch, and that's it. But everything else, in terms of my workouts, I'm still overhead pressing. It hasn't affected anything. I can still throw a ball, still do push-ups. There's days I don't even think about it. It doesn't even dawn on me that it ever happened. So then you fast forward to 2025, and I tear my Achilles. And, now I'm using PDA. So I'm using the PDA, and same surgery time frame, late August. So there's something about that month. And so I had my surgery then August 29th. And I just remember before they wheeled me in the surgery, talking to the surgeon, they're marking on my leg, make sure it's the right one. And I told him, I said, I'm going to be the best recovery you've ever had. Watch. And he was like, okay. So you fast forward to mid-September. I've got my first follow-up, and he told me, he said, okay, this is how the timeline's going to go. you will walk up a flight of stairs probably in November, and you will walk down the flight of stairs by January.
Mm-hmm.
In November, I'm walking down the stairs. So I'm 2 months ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So October, I'm going up the stairs as though it's nothing. By end of November, just before December, I'm running up the stairs. So again, I'm doing my PT. I have a great physical therapist. My physical therapist told me I'm in the top 1% of recoveries they've seen. One day my physical therapist wasn't there, so another one worked on me. And I just remember him kind of laughing with that laugh of like disbelief. And I asked him, is everything okay? He said, man, just never seen this. And he goes, hey, no offense. He goes, but you're not exactly young. So it's like, this isn't something you really see. So, and then I was discharged from PT at about 5.5 months. They were like, there's nothing else we can really do. I can jump. I can run. I can do just about everything. I mean, the only thing I have to be leery of, and they asked me to hold back until around month 9, is any running with cutting motions. So, and that's it. But I mean, it's almost as though nothing happened. The mornings I wake up a tad tight, but after about 2 or 3 steps, I'm fine. Go up and down the stairs, whatever I want to do. So, but to be discharged from PT at 5.5 months with an Achilles tear in your 50s. Yeah, in your 50s. Yeah. I mean, the physical therapist just said, I really don't think there's much more I can do for you. And my surgeon said it too. He said, hey, I don't know if you really need to go. He's like, if you want to go, I'll keep writing the script. But he goes, if you've got better things to do with your time, maybe go do those. So I said, but I don't see, I stood on they gave me something to hold on to, and I stood up with, on my toes on the one foot. And then I even let go what they had me hold on to and just kind of did a few on my own. So, yeah. I've also seen, oral versions of BPC help people who have abdominal issues. I haven't used it, but I've known some bodybuilders who have, just because of the high volume of food intake that they typically have, especially open bodybuilders, guys that are competing in that 260, 270 range, all that food, it can cause some stomach distress. And I've seen them take that to kind of get rid of some of the inflammation in their stomach, and just kind of calm things down. So, but I'm a big fan of the injectable. I did not inject it directly in the injury. I injected it, in my stomach, just subcutaneously, just because it's systemic, right? So it's going to spread through the body. I didn't see a need to direct it, put it directly in the Achilles. So,
yeah. It's pretty remarkable how just injecting into your stomach, how it kind of travels to the injured tissue. It's a little bit about like, mechanistically, just for the viewers and all of this, but it works on VEGF signaling, which is a cytokine, right? And when you have inflammation or an injury, your capillaries become leaky and they release all these cytokines that promote healing of the tissue. And the main thing that BBC 157, or one of the kind of theoretical mechanisms, is VEGF signaling, which is related to angiogenesis, which means that your blood vessels are forming new capillaries and new blood vessels, and that's going to help with more blood perfusion to the injured tissue. That's going to give the tissue more nutrients, and it's going to help with healing. And the oral tablets are also super interesting in terms of people with inflammatory bowel disease, right? And that's something that I've noticed people have some improvement with, although there's still a lot of data. But that's incredible, the rate of recovery that these peptides can help with. And BBC 157 is also derived from gastric peptides, right? Which also makes sense why it's so helpful in terms of gut health. So remarkable stories that I've heard of just people noticing these tremendous healing properties of it. And it's also often paired with TB500. So speak a little bit on that. And also I wanted to ask one more question, which is, you kind of described it in an acute setting. So if I just had the injury and then, taking it maybe a month or two later, have you noticed patients with maybe who they've had like a labrum tear or a tennis elbow or something that maybe has been hurting them for a few years, and they haven't necessarily gotten the help that they need, and for more of like a chronic injury, BBC 157 in that setting?
Yeah, I was actually going to see if we could bring it back real quick to the BPC. I've seen guys do that actually who have like a tennis elbow and they've had it for years and then take the BPC and they've come in and 3 months later, they're like, man, that inflammation is gone.
Wow.
It's just gone and I'm better. And we've had patients who are taking BPC just because, they've come in and they're like, hey, I was a big time athlete in high school, played a little bit of college, also, and they're like, my body's beat up, and I've been working out for years. And they'll take BPC and it's just kind of like, it just kind of cools it off, kind of puts that fire out and some of that inflammation, the sore knees, the tennis elbow, the little tendonitis, it goes away. So yeah, it's got a lot of use for that. I've always said if there's one peptide, like if you told me like take one year round, that's one I would probably take. And a lot of that's just because of, for my lifestyle, how active I am, I think it would be it's a good one just to kind of keep that inflammation down. I think it's an amazing peptide. So I think that's one that people, if you're a little banged up, a little sore, definitely look into that. So,
and what was your course with the BPC 157? Are you still taking it, or were you just taking it for a short term?
I took it for the whole time I was in PT for 5 months, and then I stopped. So, and I might actually get back on it just because, even though I feel great, just because the overall benefits of it. I mean, I started taking it, and I would say some of the swelling around the ankle and around the Achilles was gone within maybe 2 weeks. A lot of the swelling was gone. My physical therapist commented on it. She's like, hey, a lot of that swelling is gone. And she's like, are you elevating your leg? And I was like, not really. It was just beginning to deflate on its own. So, yeah, I think it's just a great peptide. So,
yeah,
but the TB5. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say,
transition.
Oh yeah, the TB500 is great too, right? I mean that's great for muscular injuries. So I think that's another one that people should take too if they have those types of injuries. And also just kind of boost the immune system. So so it has a lot of great effects in the body. But the muscular injuries, that's a good one too. I've used that also. So I definitely think if I had to choose, I'm taking the BPC or the PDA, but it's great also for this for healing muscular injuries. And I've seen a lot of people use that too. So they've had injuries. We've had guys with pec tears come in and order, get both peptides to help with the healing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's often paired together. Although I think there's some recent research that's suggested that maybe TB500 is not. It's good for muscular injury, but maybe not the best for ligament injuries.
Right. Exactly.
So there's a little bit of nuance there. It works predominantly on actin regulation, which is what makes it super effective for wound healing. But yeah, it's great in combination if you do have any type of muscle tear, and it works similarly. It works very symbiotically with BPC 157 in terms of helping with like fibroblast migration and endothelial cell movement. So, yeah, that is often paired together, and you often see that sold as one injection. And in the growth agonist category, another one that's often used, and this is everything we've discussed today so far is our injectable peptides, but one that I think works even better as a topical cream is GHK copper. And that works, people use it for skin, hair, nails. It's there is some data of it being injectable and helping with systemic injuries as well, although that's still an ongoing research. But yeah, speak a little bit about GHK copper and what context you've seen that be helpful.
So I haven't seen anyone use it in the injectable form. Everything I've seen has been either an oral or topical. I was on a webinar about a month ago, and they were actually talking about there may be some data showing that you only need to use it 2 to 3 times a year for a month at a shot. So they're starting to see that maybe it hangs around in the system for a while and continues to affect the collagen production. The cream is incredibly popular. A lot of people like to rub it on their face and things like that to kind of help restore the collagen. And of course, the oral version is popular too. The pharmacy we deal with doesn't do an injectable version of it. But I have seen the cream used with good results also in terms of like, helping to rebuild the collagen and just kind of make the skin look better. I've had some people say their nails, but the thing I've noticed the most is skin overall. Just people saying their skin quality is better, the elasticity is better. So, but most people seem to prefer the cream as part of their nighttime regimen. So, but we've had a few people use the oral version too. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But
awesome.
if we get to where this is only used, a couple times a month, I mean, that's going to be great also, then you're talking about just buying it for a little while and not having to continue to use it every day.
Absolutely. That's and the 2 to 3 times a year, that was for topical use in terms of just
I think they were talking about the oral. So
the oral.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I thought was kind of interesting that it would hang around the system. But again, these are just kind of some ongoing studies. So
sure.
Who knows what we're going to hear in another year or two, it could be like, no, we were wrong. Let's, let's continue to use it. So
yeah,
it's safe.
absolutely.
And if you're getting good results, I mean, maybe continue to use it as long as your practitioner, is okay with it. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's also a topical cream or an oral tablet, which is sometimes a barrier to entry for a lot of these peptides for people is the fact that you have to inject it.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to speak ill on like other clinics, but I had sometimes clinics do try, and there's a little bit of like grifting where they will try and like sell you like a sermorelin nasal spray and say, this is gonna help your IGF-1 or your growth hormone. And I would just tell people to be wary of that. There's no data that it's bioavailable. And some peptides are bioavailable, especially if they're like 3 or 4 chain amino acids. But oftentimes these clinics will be selling you things and to just, they're like, oh, if you're afraid of injections, you can just use this as an alternative, but it rarely ever works. I actually just had a patient yesterday who was using the sermorelin nasal spray, and he came to me and we got his blood work done, and his IGF was the same as it was before. So he's been using it for 6 months, right? And it's just essentially just
throwing his money away.
Exactly. So just something to mention that some of these peptides are bioavailable intranasally, but most of these are injected. And if someone's trying to sell you a different form of it, there's no literature as of now that supports that.
Yeah, I would be very leery of a nasal spray. I mean, that just doesn't, I don't see that working. I mean, that's up there with the deer antler spray, right? So I just can't see that. Yeah, I would stick with stick with what your practitioner tells you, of course, but I've never seen a nasal spray be effective either. So I just don't,
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone tries to sell you a nasal spray for your peptide, maybe go the other direction. Go find it.
Although I will say like C-Max and C-Lank, which I think are like 3 or 4 chain amino acids,
different
do
story.
work really well. Different story, right?
Totally different.
Same with pinealon. And I've been using these myself too, and I've definitely noticed a subtle but impactful change. But we'll cover those in a part 2 because those are more deeper in the peptide rabbit hole. We'll cover the more commonly used ones, and that kind of leads us to the next group, which is maybe the most popular peptides outside of maybe insulin, which is semaglutide, tirzepatide, and pending on the way, retatrutide. And we kind of discussed, these are controversial because there is kind of this over reliance of patients just coming in and not understanding that it's a tool in your toolbox, and you got to do a bunch of other stuff to really take advantage of these and not just shut down your metabolism. But speak on your experiences on the GLP-1s.
So I think, you hit the nail on the head, right? This is just another tool in the toolbox. And I think part of it is also just kind of re-educating people, because our society has pushed for such a long time weight. That number really just does not mean anything. What matters is your muscle mass and your body fat percentage. Weight is kind of like, if you're chasing weight, you're just you're chasing your tail, I think a perfect example is at my clinic, we have 2 patients. They are the same height. They're both women. They're both 5'6.8". One of them weighs 153 pounds. Her body fat percentage was 36%. The other one is 170 pounds. Her body fat percentage is 23%. So when you hear the 153 and the 170, you're like, oh, I want to be the 153. No, you don't want to be the 153. The body fat is over a third of her weight. The other one is less than a quarter. So weight is just not the number you want to chase. Chase that. Now, in terms of the GLP-1s, they can absolutely help you with losing the body fat, provided you eat, sufficient protein to maintain the lean tissue you have, and you engage in some activity, some weight training. I've seen people keep their muscle mass, relatively the same, lose just a little in a month, but manage to bring their overall, weight down by 12 pounds. I know I said weight doesn't matter, but just to kind of give an example there, I've seen their body fat go down too. And then I've seen people only lose 2, and that's because they weren't doing any activity. So the more activity, the better you're going to get out of it. Like most things, the more you're putting into it, the more you're going to get out of it. It's a tool that's going to help, but it's not going to do everything. It's like if you have a nail and you want to hammer it in and you just get the hammer and kind of lightly tap it, it goes in a little bit, but not much. But if you haul back and really whack it, then the nail goes in all the way. And that's the exercise. If you're just kind of lightly doing it, you get some results. If you want to get the real results, put more into it. Adequate protein intake, adequate, fluid intake also. You want to keep your fluids high because it can lead to constipation. So make sure you're drinking enough water, and exercise. And the results can be absolutely phenomenal. I mean, absolutely. We have a patient, I saw him in the lobby. I didn't even recognize him. I didn't know it was him. He was here to see me. I came out, had no clue. He had a hat on, had his head down. And then when he stood up, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like whoa, hey, what is this? So yeah. And we've had a few people like that too. And then you have some people on the other end of the spectrum that weren't doing what they were supposed to do. So they're not losing as much. So again, like we said at the beginning about the peptides, it's great, but it's not a miracle drug. It's going to do a lot for you. Some people will say, you lose 20 pounds or whatever. It's more than you've lost in the other 2 years on your own. So clearly it is helping you. But if you were to put more into it, you would get more out of it. So tirzepatide, we get better results, significantly better results and less side effects. We've only had one person who switched from tirzepatide back to semaglutide and think it was better. Everybody else has been much happier with tirzepatide. Semaglutide, typically will cost you less, but does it really cost you less if you're on it longer? Not really. So yeah, so eventually the cost evens itself out. And then there's liraglutide. We've had 1 or 2 people use that. They weren't too happy with that. That's a daily shot. But hopefully, retatrutide gets approved. From what they're saying in some of the research, it's going to be a real game changer. So
yeah. Well, maybe we can review a little bit about the differences between them, right? One is in terms of like the receptors that they target. They're all kind of termed under the GLP-1 category, but they are tirzepatide targets more receptors, retatrutide targets even more receptors. So if you want to speak on that a little bit.
Yeah. So the tirzepatide, people that have like a really strong cravings and have a hard time just turning that food noise off, it's going to help shut that off. And a good way, I think, to always start with that is a really low dose to kind of assess the person's tolerance and then slowly amp them up. And I think this is where, people can get themselves in trouble. I think you should always go sit down face to face with, your provider to get these medications. I think sometimes when you just kind of do it through, a quick mail order situation, you're not getting the adequate care you need. And you're not going to get the right dose for you. And you might say, oh, this is cheaper. But a lot of times people misconstrued, volume with dose. And they'll say, well, they're giving me 50 units. You're giving me 50 units. They're giving you 50 units at 2.5 milligrams. This is 50 units at 5 milligrams. So, it's a stronger. So always, actually meet with your provider for that. But yeah, the tirzepatide works on, 2 different things. The semaglutide works on one. It just kind of slows down, emptying of your stomach. So just slows the digestion, whereas the tirzepatide's turning that food noise off also, kind of getting rid of those cravings, making it just more manageable. A lot of patients tell us they're like, I don't have that buzz in my head and that desire to go eat, even when I'm not hungry. They're like, I just don't even think about it, the food the same way. And the GLP-1s are a good way to kind of call time out and get things in order, get your exercise in order, your nutrition in order, so that you can start making better choices and then slowly get off those medications. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's what you said at the end there is should always be the end goal with GLP-1s is to slowly get off of it and
Mhm.
restore your metabolism, right? It's
Yeah.
losing
Yeah.
weight is a little bit more complex than just the laws of
Mhm.
thermodynamics of calories in,
Yeah.
calories
Right.
out, right?
Right.
If your
Yeah.
if your maintenance calorie load is like 2,000 calories a
Mhm.
day, and you start kind of shutting down your metabolism, and then
Mhm.
you come off of these GLP-1s and start consuming 2,000 calories a day again, you're going to
Right.
just put on a bunch of weight because your metabolism has slowed down. So
Absolutely.
also assessing your thyroid health, your hormonal health,
Mhm.
your
Mhm.
tracking inflammation in your body. All of
Yeah.
those things are really helpful to get
Yeah.
a bigger picture approach to kind of review of systems approach
Absolutely.
to managing
Yeah.
these things. So yeah, well
Importance of
said.
blood work right there, I mean,
Hmm.
because let's say the issue is hormonal, and you're treating it with a GLP-1, you're not really treating it that effectively because you're kind of
Hmm.
masking what the problem is. If your hormone profile is such that losing weight and losing body fat is going to be incredibly difficult and we don't fix the hormonal issue, you're kind of always going to be in that rut.
Yeah.
That GLP-1 is probably just going to make you lose a bunch of muscle mass, put you in a position you don't want to be in. You're
Hmm.
going to get off it and you're going to be worse off than you were. If
Hmm.
it is a hormonal issue, then we need to attack the hormonal issue. So, and combining the two also, kind of like you talked about with the peptides, is great also. So,
Right.
I've seen people use all three peptide, GLP-1, and do HRT. Those
Hmm.
results are just astronomical. Those are incredible. Those
Yeah.
are just absolutely incredible results that people have. But you
Hmm.
want to have something to kind of help you maintain that muscle mass, especially if you're really new to exercise and new to, eating, a better diet than you were before. So, it's going to help you keep that. But yeah, blood work's so important because there could be some other issues that are causing this weight gain. So maybe your thyroid is
Yeah.
shot. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And yeah, you want to correct everything.
Mhm.
And then, obviously the semaglutide is a GLP-1 agonist, and then
Mhm.
tirzepatide targets GLP-1 and
Yeah.
GIP.
Yeah.
And then now retatrutide, where there's a lot of
Yeah.
uh, really interesting research, and people are buying this from gray market sources. But again,
Mhm.
I think it should
Yeah.
be end of the year approved for production by compounding pharmacies. But it targets GLP-1, GIP,
Mhm.
and glucagon, which is what makes it
Yeah.
unique,
Yeah.
and it seems to be a
Targeting
little
the
bit more
glucagon
muscle
is huge.
sparing as well. Yeah.
Yep. Targeting the glucagon's huge. One of the things when you were mentioning about the compounding pharmacies have it, the webinar I was on about a month ago. The people in that webinar said that they've actually kind of met with the new administration, and they were talking about we will we will let you produce every peptide out there except retatrutide.
Mm,
So that might be one that only big pharma gets. There's that
okay.
possibility. Yeah.
Okay.
They said if we open up all the peptides to you, this is the one you can't touch. We'll see.
Wow. Yeah.
So maybe
Industries not having our best interest in mind is not super shocking, but
no, not at all.
it's
I mean, there's sometimes they're looking out for you. There's sometimes they're just really not, because in the
right.
end, it is a business, right? So
Absolutely.
they're kind of thinking about money, and if retatrutide is what it looks like it's going to be, they're going to want to hold that one for a while.
Yeah.
They just are. So
Hmm.
because of what we're talking about with the glucagon, I mean, we're talking about just the next level of weight loss. So
Hmm.
they are not going to want to let that go. So,
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't want to let tirzepatide go, right? You
Right.
remember the legal battles a year ago from
Hmm.
that. And they just didn't want to
Yeah.
let that go. So,
Yeah, I think every compounding pharmacy that I work with has is getting emails from Eli Lilly about shutting down their
mhm,
production and
mhm,
yeah,
yeah,
legislation threats. So
yeah,
it's an
yep,
interesting kind of political
yep,
dynamic
right,
underlying all of these things
yep.
as well.
And it
Um,
can also be a states issue too, right? Because there's certain states that allow certain peptides and some don't,
mm,
or they allow them in
right,
certain forms. Like they're like, you can have it in an oral, but not an injectable form.
right,
And that's a
right.
state by state issue. So each state
Hmm.
has their own laws when it comes to the peptides. So, we have certain peptides that we can't ship to certain patients because, the state they live in and that peptide's banned there.
Hmm.
So, Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, speaking on the oral peptides, the oral GLP-1s, well, what has your
Mhm.
experience been with that? I haven't really had any patients on those, so I'm
We
curious
haven't
what you've seen.
had anybody on that, so
Okay.
we've only been dealing with the injectable.
Mhm.
I've heard it's not quite as effective, but I just really can't speak to it from firsthand knowledge. But we're only dealing with the injectable right now. So, I mean, if it is as effective, it's really, that would be great because we're,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of people that really don't like giving themselves injections. So
Mhm.
they have to pop in once a week for about, 10 minutes. We could do the quick shot for them and, chart and then get them on their way. But
Mhm.
yeah, I haven't seen anything in the orals. Have you seen people taking the orals or?
I haven't. I don't have any
Okay.
experience with that either.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's. I think people are more open to the GLP-1s because it's once a week
Mhm.
injections
Yeah.
as
Hmm.
opposed to like the growth hormone secretagogues, which are
Right.
5 days on, two
Right.
days off.
Yeah.
But I will say the injections always seem daunting and to patients until they actually start injecting and they're like, oh,
Right. Yeah.
once I start figuring out how to do it properly, it's
Yeah.
it's it's pretty simple. So
It's pretty
um
simple. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And it's not very deep, right? Tiny needle. It's like a
exactly.
little
It's
pinch at worst. Yeah.
right. It's these
Yeah.
small, tiny insulin needles, and
Mhm.
you're injecting around 30 units.
Yeah.
Um, But one thing that people, this is a good transition into the next
Mhm.
topic. One thing that people do struggle with self-injecting sometimes is NAD plus because it can kind
Mhm.
of burn a little. But
Yeah.
this is also, I think, I would put this up with sermorelin as like a great
Mhm.
introductory
Mhm.
peptide, or not a peptide. Sorry, this is not a peptide at all. It is
Mhm.
just something that's central to mitochondrial function.
Right.
Um, and I see men and women, but
Mhm.
predominantly women really enjoy
Mhm.
NAD plus.
Yeah.
It's really helpful for mitochondrial health.
Yep.
NAD plus is in every cell in your body,
Mhm.
and it is your NAD plus to NADH ratio is a good indicator of your metabolic health, of
Mhm.
your redox reactions, and it's I've seen patients with like autoimmune diseases. Um, their blood work has gotten better, like their ESR,
Yep.
CRP, people, patients with arthritis, Hashimoto's.
Yeah.
It's a really remarkable compound that I've seen a lot of patients have success with. Um, Again, not a peptide, but
Right.
tell me a little bit about your experience with
Yeah.
NAD plus and
So
sub-Q injections.
yeah, we've had a lot of people with NAD plus, especially in the last few months. It's really taken off.
Mm,
We've mostly we had people starting with IVs, but we have had people start with the subcutaneous injection. Like you said, they say it burns just a little bit, but nothing they couldn't get through.
mhm,
But the results of everybody's taken it has loved it.
mhm,
And they've all had great results. And in particular, they say their cognitive function is what really seems to improve.
mhm,
They seem more alert. They seem to be able to concentrate better, think better. They say the productivity at work is much better. That's the one that I hear the most in terms of what people have noticed about it. We also do the IVs too. That takes a lot longer. So I think people are
mhm,
a little leery of that. But the subcutaneous injection, you're doing that. Most people are doing it daily. So
mhm,
or at least every other day. So, but yeah, the big one is the cognitive function. That's the one we hear the most is, yeah, I can concentrate so much better. And then they say, yeah, I kind of laid off of it for about 2 months and I kind of found myself in that brain fog again, kind of like, oh, what's going on here?
mhm.
So yeah, cognitive function seems to just be just through the roof in terms of how much better people are.
Absolutely, and that tracks with what I've seen as well in
Mhm.
terms of the other clinic that I work for is a psychiatry clinic, and
Mhm.
I've had patients reduce their ADHD medications. I've had
Mhm.
patients even
Wow.
reduce their antidepressants
Mhm.
just because they're noticing everything that kind of comes down to your
Yeah.
cellular mitochondrial energy, and if you
Right.
can improve that, then you could just it's kind of like a rising tide that raises all ships,
Mhm.
and yeah, I think it's one of the most popular kind of introductory compounds, which is why I wanted
Mhm.
to cover this in this
Mhm.
introductory talk. But yeah,
Have you
wonderful.
seen a lot of
That's
people do IVs? Have you had a lot of patients do IVs with it?
so since we are predominantly virtual, we
Okay.
only do the sub Q injections.
Yeah.
and the IVs tend to be a little bit more expensive too, because you gotta get a clinician like sitting down and starting an IV, and it generally takes like 4 to 6 hours because it burns. You need to kind of like do it really slowly. So for that reason, we do the sub-Q, which patients eventually get used to and tolerate really well. But there probably are some pros and cons to both. I would imagine getting one bolus once a month versus like, every 3 days a week or every day, injecting NAD plus. And there's also like oral forms of NAD plus, but obviously then you're dealing with kind of gut absorption, and then people take nicotinamide, riboside, and NMN, and even just niacinamide, right? Eventually downstream converts to NAD plus, but nothing seems to be comparable to NAD plus directly injected, and in my experience at least.
Yeah, the IV is tough. I mean, you're talking about hours. I mean, we had one person, it took us almost 5 hours.
Wow.
Because every time we opened up that IV, they just they couldn't handle the chest kind of hurt and burning. Yeah. So it takes a while. And then we've had some people eventually get down to where it's 45 minutes. That's pretty quick. So.
Oh, okay. So you kind of titrated by their comfortability.
Yeah. So, and just as they've done it over time, they just, they get used to it and they can handle it. And, we've got a couple of people that are just like, yeah, man, open that thing up. Like, so, but the IV patients, we always tell them like, hey, bring your laptop, bring your phone, bring a charger, you'll be here for a little bit. Yeah. So subcutaneous is definitely better for that. You can people can kind of self-administer it and kind of move along.
My wife started the NAD plus, and similarly, the first time she took it, even just as a sub-Q injection, she kind of had to like lie down for like 20-30 minutes, and she was like, well, I just feel this flush, which is related to the niacin aspects of it, right? And then as she's progressively started taking it, notices that recovery time is slower and slower. Now she can just take it and kind of go about her day. But she had that initial adjustment period where it took her maybe 30 minutes of like just sitting down to feel okay to go again. And now she's noticing the benefits. And I wonder if that's kind of, this is just kind of theoretical, but like related to the cells being so starved for NAD plus, and initially when they get it, maybe is a little bit of, it's overwhelming to the mitochondria, to the at the cellular level. But
I would absolutely believe that. Yeah. It's just because it's like almost like when I don't know, like this is a little off the subject, but like you see those shows, those survival shows, and the person is out there and they don't have much to eat, and then they make it through the challenge, and then they have something to eat, and they eat so much then that they don't feel well. So it's probably the same thing. Yeah,
I think that's a perfect analogy.
Yeah. Yep. So
great. Yeah. So I think we've covered everything we wanted to or at least for like this introductory level, and we'll definitely do in the future a hormone episode where we can discuss the androgens. I know that's something that you have great expertise in. So that will be really exciting. And then we'll maybe do another episode on like a part 2 peptides, covering some more of the, like PT141, Cmax, C-Lang, epitalon. There's so much.
So many peptides.
And there's so much in that rabbit hole. So we'll definitely dig a little bit deeper. But what are your overall thoughts on kind of the future of peptides, to just kind of close out, in terms of, the we kind of discussed a little bit of like the pharmaceutical industry involvement. Also, like as things progress, maybe there'll be more like oral applications, transdermal applications. Where do you kind of see things going? And it's also people are becoming more aware of it. And how do you see things evolving? And what are some things that you would maybe even preach caution about?
I definitely think it's just going to continue to take off. I think there's going to be the handful of people that thought it was going to be a miracle cure for them, and they're going to kind of drop out. But I do think it's just going to be a nice steady incline. I think it's like most things when they first come out, right? It spikes really high, and then it kind of levels off. And then I think it's just going to be kind of gradual, continued uptick just because they do work. In the future, I think if anybody can ever get it to where the injection is twice a week, 3 times a week, once a week, it will really explode. You will just see you will have people lined up around the corner wanting to get the peptides just because they are so effective. I hope that one day maybe, there's also an oral version too, just so you don't have to keep injecting yourself, but I don't see it slowing down. I just don't see how it could. I mean, especially because you can make peptides that target certain actions in the body. Like, hey, let's make this one to heal, connective tissue. Let's make this one to heal muscles. Let's get this one to help with abdominal fat. This one for your heart. So it's just going to keep going because there's going to be pharmacists sitting there constantly manipulating it and finding something that helps. And there's going to be a peptide for everybody eventually. So I definitely don't see it going away.
Yeah, it's an exciting space for sure, and it's thanks for sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience with this. I think this is going to help a lot of people understand and weed out the confusion and figure out what might be a good option for them. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Gavin. I really
absolutely.
appreciate it.
Thank you.